Actually a picture of me back when I first started. Yeah, I look at least 5 years younger there. You know what they always say.
41 years, right? That's
Delirious.
1983.
Yeah.
So this, I had always assumed that you'd put a ton of...
The screen goes dark. Silence. Then a deep voice echoes. My very first memory of all is of my mother and father fighting. That's my very first memory. The image emerges slowly. Brooklyn, 1960s. A modest apartment in Bushwick. A 3-year-old child watches as his mother, Lillian, cries in the hallway. His father, Charles Edward Murphy, a transit cop and aspiring comedian, picks the boy up in his arms. That moment would be the last clear memory of his parents together. Because 5 years later, on a night in 1969, a woman would stab Charles Murphy to death. Crime of passion. The victim of what Eddie would later call, with painful irony, the Murphy charm. The boy was 8 years old when he lost the father he barely knew, and the trauma was only beginning. Charles's death left Lillian devastated and sick. Tuberculosis. A single mother, 2 young children, no resources. Eddie and his brother Charlie were sent to foster care. A full year under the command of that woman he would describe decades later as a kind of black Nazi. Bad days. Terrible days. She served pigtails for dinner. When Eddie, with the cruel innocence of childhood, told his grandmother they were being fed snakes, the woman grabbed Charlie and beat him. Eddie learned then that laughter could be a shield, that making people laugh was survival. That fragile boy, traumatized, abandoned by the father who died and the mother who fell ill, decided he would be funny. Because being funny meant not feeling pain. When Lillian recovered and married Vernon Lynch, a man Eddie would call Pops with genuine gratitude, something began to change. Vernon was solid, present. He worked at an ice cream factory and put, in Eddie's words, all the right shit in me. But the boy had already found his calling. At 15, he listened to Richard Pryor's album, That Nigger's Crazy, and knew exactly what he would be: comedian. He started in Long Island nightclubs, still underage, earning $25 a night. He imitated everyone: Muhammad Ali, Bill Cosby, Stevie Wonder. His secret weapon was Peter Sellers, who played multiple characters in a single film. Eddie would do the same. He would transform into anyone, anything, to not have to be himself. Because himself still carried that frightened boy in foster care, eating pigtails and trying not to cry. In 1980, at just 19 years old, Eddie Murphy joined Saturday Night Live. The show was in crisis, dying in the ratings. But Eddie saved it. Mr. Robinson, Adult Buckwheat, Cynical Grumpy Gumby. Characters that became legendary. America fell in love with that young black man from Brooklyn who had fire in his eyes and confidence that seemed unshakable. But behind that arrogance were scars. Eddie wasn't, never was, the life of the party. He himself would admit later. Supposedly my dad was the life of the party. The party started when my dad came. He was loud and funny, and I am never the life of the party. The ghost of his murdered father haunted him. That man he barely knew, but from whom he inherited fatal charisma. The Murphy charm. The ability to make anyone fall in love. And the shadow of tragedy that came with it. The 80s were absolute glory. 48 Hours, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop, which made him the second highest paid actor in Hollywood at 23. Eddie Murphy was a money-making machine. His films grossed hundreds of millions. He also sang, had a top 2 hit with Party All the Time, produced by Rick James. He was invincible, unstoppable, and dangerously confident. His stand-ups were brutal, raw, delirious. Jokes about gays that today would implode any career. "Faggots aren't allowed to look at my ass while I'm on stage," he'd say, while the audience roared with laughter. It was 1983. Eddie was 22 and thought he could say anything. But culture was changing, and Eddie wasn't noticing. In 1993, he married Nicole Mitchell, a model. They had 5 children together: Bria, Miles, Shane, Zola, Bella. But Eddie already had 2 children outside the marriage: Eric with Paulette McNeely, Christian with Tamara Hood. Eddie's private life was always a complex puzzle. Multiple women, multiple families, 10 children in total with 5 different mothers. Men looked at him thinking, "He's crazy. How much did that cost?" Women looked differently. As he himself would observe with irony, "Eddie Murphy must be doing his thing. Eddie Murphy be getting it in." But in 1997, everything collapsed. 2 in the morning, Santa Monica Boulevard. Eddie Murphy driving his Toyota Land Cruiser. Police followed him after seeing him pick up Shalimar Sayuli, a transgender prostitute known in the area. When officers stopped the vehicle, Eddie was questioned for 30 minutes. No crime. He was released. Shalimar was arrested on a prostitution warrant. The official explanation? Eddie was being a good Samaritan, giving a ride to someone in need. His explanation years later would be even more bizarre, that he spent nights driving through Manhattan giving thousands of dollars to homeless people and prostitutes, convincing them to leave the streets. Nobody believed it. The press devoured the story. SNL did a brutal parody with Tim Meadows playing Eddie doing community service saving transsexuals. The man who had mocked gays in his stand-ups was now the joke. The hypocrisy was shocking. And Nicole, his wife, was shocked. She would stay with him for 8 more years, but the marriage was doomed. And Shalimar? Less than a year later, she was found dead on the sidewalk outside her apartment, wearing only lingerie. Police said it was an accident, that she tried to enter through the window using a towel as a rope and fell 5 floors. But Shalimar had received death threats. She was writing a tell-all book, and then, suddenly, she was dead. Eddie hired a Hollywood private detective to contain the scandal, sued Shalimar's relatives for $1 million for talking to tabloids. The truth never came out, but the stain remained. His career went into freefall. The 2000s were cruel. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, a $100 million bomb that grossed only 7. Norbit, Meet Dave, imagine that. Film after failed film. Eddie won 3 Razzies, including Worst Actor of the Decade. Critics tore him apart. The audience walked away. He was making, in his own words, shitty movies. And in 2007, when he finally had the chance to redeem himself with Dreamgirls, playing singer James Thunder Early in a performance acclaimed by critics, he was nominated for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Everyone thought he would win. It was his night, his redemption. But when Alan Arkin won for Little Miss Sunshine, Eddie stood up and walked out of the theater. He didn't stay to see Jennifer Hudson win. He didn't stay for the end of the ceremony. He just left. Years later, he would explain, "What pisses me off isn't losing, it's that they made me come all the way down here. I could have lost at home. I'm all in a tuxedo. What a waste of time." But the truth was deeper. Eddie Murphy, the foster care kid, the son of the murdered man, the comedian who saved SNL, the king of Hollywood in the 80s, had been publicly humiliated. Again. In 2011, he was invited to host the Oscars. His friend Brett Ratner would be the producer. But when Ratner was fired for homophobic comments, Eddie abandoned the hosting gig. The Academy was furious. Members said it was a career mistake. But Eddie was already tired. Tired of Hollywood. Tired of failures. Tired of being the joke. He announced he was semi-retired and disappeared. For 6 years, Eddie Murphy lived on his couch, literally. He played guitar, watched television, spent time with his children. In 2006, he had divorced Nicole. He had a brief and explosive romance with Mel B, the Spice Girl. She got pregnant, and Eddie, publicly, said he didn't know whose baby it was until a DNA test. "You shouldn't jump to conclusions, sir," he told a reporter. Mel B gave birth to Angel Iris Murphy Brown on Eddie's 46th birthday. The DNA test confirmed it. He was the father. Eddie paid child support but initially had no contact with his daughter. Mel B would say years later that he was the great love of her life. Eventually, father and daughter reconciled. Another child, another mother, another complicated story. Eddie Murphy, the man with 10 children with 5 different women, remained a mystery even to himself. But something was changing. In 2012, Eddie met Paige Butcher, an Australian model. She deleted all social media to protect their privacy. They had 2 children, Izzy and Max. And for the first time in decades, Eddie seemed calm, at peace. He had found Vernon Lynch again, the father figure who saved him in childhood. Now Eddie was that man to his own children, 10 of them, some adults, some still small. Grandchildren too. Eddie Murphy, grandfather. The foster care kid now building the family he never had. And then, in 2019, came Dolomite Is My Name. Eddie playing Rudy Ray Moore, another black comedian from the 70s who fought against the system. Critics exploded, 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Eddie Murphy was back, not as the arrogant 20-year-old, but as a 58-year-old man who had lived, suffered, failed, survived. He returned to SNL after 35 years. The ovation was deafening. He won his first Emmy. In 2023, he won the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. In 2024, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. was released, with his daughter Bria in the cast. Eddie Murphy had come full circle. But what remains when the lights go out, when the audience leaves, when the Razzies and the Oscars, the scandals and the headlines, the mistakes and the glories all dissolve? What remains is a 64-year-old man, married to Paige, father of 10 children, grandfather of 3, who still plays guitar in the backyard, who still remembers his murdered father, who still carries that foster care boy who ate pigtails and learned that laughter was armor. Eddie Murphy built an empire on trauma, transformed pain into comedy, loneliness into characters, abandonment into family. He's not the life of the party, never was, but he's the man who made the whole world laugh while carrying scars no one saw. Trauma shapes us in many different ways, he once said, and he's right. Eddie Murphy was shaped by every tragedy, by the father he barely knew, by the mother who fell ill, by the foster home that taught him to survive, by the jokes he told and the mistakes he made, by the children he raised and the women he loved, by the bad movies and the forgotten glories. He's one of the greatest comedians of all time, one of the most successful actors in history, a man with 10 children and 5 ex-partners, a Brooklyn kid who became a legend. And underneath all of that, there's still that 8-year-old child, looking at his father's coffin, learning that the world can take everything from you in an instant. But Eddie Murphy learned something more, that you can lose everything and rebuild, that you can fall and get up, that laughter, even when born from pain, still has power, that family, even fragmented and complicated, is still the foundation of everything, and that the Murphy charm, that fatal magnetism that killed his father and almost destroyed his career, can also be redemption when directed toward love. Eddie Murphy isn't perfect, far from it, but he's human, deeply, painfully, beautifully human. And maybe that's why we still laugh with him, because we recognize in his laughter something we all carry, the desperate need to transform our pain into something others can bear. Eddie Murphy has done that for 50 years and continues to do it, because deep down he's still that boy trying to make people laugh. So no one sees that. Inside, he's still bleeding. The screen goes dark, silence, and then, distant, the sound of laughter. Eddie Murphy's laughter. That laughter that saved SNL, that made billions of dollars, that hid a world of pain. The laughter that is, after all, the only truth he knows.